Welcome, friends, back to another edition of Wampa Radio. It's a 2-pack edition, so get your California dreamin' going because the mystery's almost solved, actually, about that one. Did you hear about that, by the way?
I'm so confused. I have no idea what you're talking about.
No? You don't know?
I am clueless.
Oh,
I moved from California to Minnesota this year. I lived there for the last 6 years. I have no idea what you're talking about. I know there is a song called California Dreamin'.
Yes, it is by Tupac. So when I said we have a 2-pack of...
that California Dreamin'. I thought you meant the... there's like a one by, I think it's the Mamas and the Papas. Like
that's old school, though.
Yeah.
That's like way old school. And when I talk about old
right?
school and I mention hip-hop, like to me, it's the 90s.
Oh,
but
I went to the classic rock one, yeah.
Did you know that there has been an arrest made in the past month regarding Tupac's killer? Like this...
Really?
Yes, in the past like 4 or 5 weeks.
Wow. How would they figure that out now?
Listen, I honestly don't know if it's like some SoundCloud rapper that just needs a little boost in his exposure. So he's just like, It was me. And then now they have to sort of look into it. But
so somebody came forward and said that they were the one.
Something along those lines. I'm not necessarily brushed up on my cold cases regarding Tupac, but
I'm not either.
All this to say is that it is episode 26 of Wampa Radio. And this is, of course, a podcast as I just talk about 1990s cold case murders of it is actually about Star Wars card gaming, specifically Star Wars Unlimited, and the strategies, the discussion points, all the spoilers and such. You get it right here on Wampa Radio.
That's right. And today we're going to talk about the absence of instant speed mechanics, which is particularly relevant to you because you have another podcast called Instant Speed. So I feel like this is right up your alley and how Star Wars Unlimited is going to maintain a high level of strategic engagement. But before we get into that, I do have to touch on the Tupac issue one more time, is that there is a Star Wars connection there. You may not realize it, but Tupac appeared as a hologram on stage at a concert years ago, and he looked very similar to the holographic projections or even like the Force Ghost to a certain extent in the Star Wars universe. So there is that connection. Tupac has appeared as, either, you could say a hologram projection if it's a communication device. I feel like that's maybe more it. But, I'm sure there's a lot of us that want to think of him as sort of like a Force Ghost too. So I think there is a little bit of a Tupac Star Wars connection there. He
does speak to us sometimes from beyond the grave to a degree. And yes, like the hologram and such, he is kind of Force ghosty to that degree, for sure. Unfortunately, maybe this was our Order 66 that happened like in the 90s.
They knew he was like a Jedi, so he was... That's why they took him out.
Yeah.
It's like the Emperor was like, we missed one. He's in the 1990s in Los Angeles.
Oh, boy. I don't want to make light of somebody's unfortunate demise, but I think we're past the expiration date, the, what is it called? The statute of limitations.
I am still sad about Plo Koon. It is true. So I appreciate you for being sensitive.
I'm going to be sensitive here. I'm going to be sensitive here.
Yeah,
all right.
Thanks.
Shall we wheel into the Wampa Cave Poll, my friend?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So this week's Wampa Cave Poll was short and sweet. It wasn't a very much. This was more of like a litmus test for how real our audience is, how accurate, how dug into the lore they are. And the Wampa Cave Poll this week, Doa, was quite simply, in all caps, who shot first? Han Solo or Greedo? This is probably the biggest, most chasm-worthy schism within Star Wars fans and pretenders. But let's get to the bottom of this, Doa.
Now, I don't want to be a gatekeeper or anything like that, but if you think that Greedo shot first, you are either George Lucas himself or maybe not a real Star Wars fan. I don't know, because Han Solo shooting first is such an iconic part of who that character is. It's such a great moment to establish that character and establish that he is rough. He's maybe not to be trusted. He's just killed this. Sure, it was a bounty hunter, but he killed this person in cold blood. It was dishonorable, you could argue. So it's such a great moment in the movie that I think to be a real a real Star Wars fan. I hate saying that because anyone can be a Star Wars fan and anyone can engage with the universe, as much or as little as they want to and enjoy it. But that said, that's such an iconic moment that I think it's hard to argue that anyone but Han shot first, despite what happened in the special editions.
The way you framed it, I think, was quite apropos, which is the fact that it was a character framing scene. It was meant to sort of give you a little bit of information about a character that you knew nothing about. Now, you and I growing up, we didn't get to see that scene live in theaters. Obviously, it was before our time in 1977. But for those who did at the time, you didn't know who Han Solo was. And like you said, is he trustworthy? Is he not? This was a scene where for us, we kind of knew the whole saga a little bit. We knew that he was going to be announced. Oh, really?
No, I mean, I watched it when I was like, 5 or 6 years old in like the 1980s, like not the late 80s. So I went into it unspoiled. My parents didn't tell me anything about it. And like, keep in mind in the late 80s, like Star Wars wasn't as culturally, pervasive as it is now, right? I mean, it was a thing that was popular, but the internet didn't exist. It didn't, not everybody in the universe loved Star Wars, right? Or knew all the references. So I didn't know. I got to see the original versions with fresh eyes, despite watching them for the first time probably about 10 years after A New Hope came out.
That's a good feeling, but not everyone had that sort of first glaring kind of like first eyes on it. But like you mentioned, like for you, that was a telling scene because you wanted to know who Han Solo was as a person, and that kind of sets up the whole thing. Is he going to betray them? Is he going to do this? He's clearly a cold-blooded murderer in this regard. And yes, it's like, so this is why I really like and adhere to the fact that, of course he shot first. In fact, as some of our viewers have pointed out, it's not that he shot first, it's that he shot, period. That Greedo didn't even get a chance to pull the trigger, that it was just merely a matter of, just bang, under the table, you're done, Greedo Crispa, and it's over. What I loved about this is that not only does it frame the rest of the movie and his character as, well, we don't know what he's going to do, but it also adds to the fact of, down the line in Empire Strikes Back, in Return to the Jedi, the change and the redemption to a degree of his character by means of joining the rebellion through his love for Leia Organa, etc. He kind of transforms, which adds to the appreciation I have for the character. But you're right. That scene with fresh eyes was setting up for A New Hope to be, is he a villain or a hero? Because his past is as a smuggler, as a pirate, as a murderer. That's some pretty greasy, turbulent ground to put your trust in if you're Obi-Wan Kenobi, if you're Luke, etc.
Yeah, I mean, Obi-Wan said Mos Eisley was a wretched hive of scum and villainy, and if you're leading a rebellion or joining a rebellion, you're going to need to deal with some unsavory underworld characters. That's just part of the game, right? So with Star Wars, it is great where you don't really know what direction, if you're not familiar with the franchise, that character is going to go. Is he going to betray? And then we kind of see like an alternate take on that type of character in Empire Strikes Back, where we have Lando come in, and we're kind of led to think the opposite. It's really great, actually, because Lando comes in and you're like, oh, he's a friend of Han Solo's. It's okay. He's another rough around the edges character. He's got a shady background, but he's friends with Han Solo, so it's fine. And then that guy betrays them, and sure, he becomes good later. But I like that they sort of like, keep that tension going through the original trilogy, where it's like, these are, some fairly unsavory individuals, and which side are they going to end up on in the end? And if you aren't familiar with the franchise and those characters, it is a mystery if you see it with fresh eyes, right?
What a very good point. That's a very, very good point. I never thought of it that way. Was that Lando was essentially kind of like the antithesis to what Han was in the first in New Hope. Damn, Doa.
Yeah.
Good, man.
Well, I mean, I'm fortunate in that when I lived in South Korea, the Star Wars franchise isn't as or wasn't as popular before the sequels. Now it's more popular there, but before that, there were a lot of people, a lot of adults that had never watched Star Wars. So I got to watch it for the first time with friends over there. My wife, who's from South Korea, had never seen it, so I got to watch her watch it for the first time. So, and it's really interesting watching an adult watch Star Wars for the first time and their reactions to all these things, and that's kind of what I learned. I learned so much more about the trilogy, and I came to respect it much more that way too, with the way the storytelling unfolds. But yeah, kind of a neat thing I was lucky enough to behold.
Well, here are the results for the cave poll. Again, the cave poll available every Sunday-ish. The ish is like a perma-ish. At Wampa Radio on Twitter. You can go there every Sunday to go ahead and check out the new poll, add your expertise to it, because we've got 93.3% of people who are correct, which is Han Solo shot first, okay? He shot first, he shot last, he just blew Greedo out of the water, and then the 6.7% of trolls and people who want to get under Flake's skin who say Greedo. I appreciate your input, friends, but you are inherently wrong. Now, I do want to also say this, that in the various revisits that George Lucas has brought to the table to change it where Greedo shot first and then Han retaliated to kind of soften his look, to
Keep
Han
him heroic.
correct, to keep him kind of like, oh, it was self-defense, to they shoot simultaneously, to the infamous head juke move.
That's right.
Which is
the first version, yeah.
Which is kind of a little bit ridiculous. I do want to quote George Lucas as saying that a film is never finished, it's only abandoned. And I lean on that a lot because I think it's a very smart quote when it comes to anything that you're creating. Eventually, you have to let it go and let it be. And this, to him, I think was, in his vision, the initial one, yeah, Han just shot first. But maybe upon revisiting it, that's where it got to. But you know, dare I say that it's one way or the other? I do dare say.
Oh, I think it's pretty safe to dare with this one. I mean, obviously Han shot first. Like it's totally true that artistic work is seldom truly finished. Like I used to do more oil painting and things, and I more recently painted Warhammer miniatures, and you always see like something more you can do, and you always see something you want to go back and change, but like you have to just accept that it's time to move on. It's not finished, it's just time to move on. And like, if you go back, and I'm not some great George Lucas historian or something, but if you go back and look at that era, those were being revised during the same time when the Phantom Menace and the prequel trilogy were being developed. And he's, said many times that the prequels are movies he made for his kids. He was thinking a lot about, what's better for, kids. And so I think he wanted to, make Han Solo a more heroic character throughout the series, which makes a certain type of sense if it's something that he's got his kids in mind when he's making all these decisions and things. But at the same time, from a storytelling perspective, obviously it's better if he's this character that goes through this transformation, right? That's just more entertaining storytelling, right? But I can see why he did it, but I definitely do not agree with it from a storytelling perspective.
So there you have it. That is the poll, the cave poll of the week. Friends, we don't ever touch on controversial topics here. Oh no.
I don't think that's controversial at all. I mean, now it's just kind of a joke. Like it's been long enough where I feel like everyone can kind of joke around with it. But
well, you day, it's Star Wars. You never know. But let's move on now to the headlines, friend, as there was not a whole lot to talk about headline-wise. There was another stream, however, that came out, which was a designer insight stream. Today being the 7th of December. It happened on the 6th of December, I believe, which was essentially yesterday for us. Yep. What we got there, I think, was a lot more. Obviously, there's some more spoilers, but just some more more higher powered decks, and just some more discussion regarding the designers and their insight to creating the game and their roles within it. Where Papa Schaefer was talking about how he's more of a big picture person and doesn't necessarily deal with other stuff. Where for example, the other developers that were on there, some were just talking about like, I am responsible for set 3 or set 4 or whatever, which you and I have pretty good relationships with people who design cards. For example, we're good friends with Brian Gottlieb, who designs sets for Legend Story Studios and Flesh and Blood, and that's kind of how it goes. It's just somebody has their baby, their pet project, and their vision is poured into it. And what I like about that is that the person who is in charge of it has a little bit of agency to actually pour their personality, their likes into it, and are able to, within the confines, obviously, of the rules, play around in that sandbox of how they want to develop and progress the game. That's got to be cool to know that there are people there who are passionate not about just card gaming, but the IP, being able to have that kind of agency.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like that for a lot of this type of product, right? Teamfight Tactics, which is an auto chess game that's in the League of Legends universe. There's a set lead on each of those too, so they have a large design team, but it's always one person who's kind of in charge, one or two people that are kind of in charge of a set, and you see that pretty much across the board in card games and things. Because if you have multiple people all designing for the same set, the theme gets lost very easily. The mechanics themes get lost very easily. So it seems like the industry in general sort of settled on this methodology of making sets. And from what we know, that's how it works over there too. Seems like a good idea, right? If everybody kind of gets their set, and I wonder if I'll get a set someday. I'd like a set at some point.
Ooh.
It'd be all pod racing. I'll just spoil that now. It would be a pod racing set, and the set would be called "Now This Is Pod Racing," and that would be the expansion. Fantasy Flight. I'll make you your pod racing set. Just give me a shot. But yeah, I think it's a good way to do things, and it's always fun to hear developers speak. Like I've been blessed enough to get a chance to spend a lot of time with a lot of video game developers at Blizzard and Riot and other companies, and really kind of like talk to them about their design philosophy and how they do things. And it's always so interesting. And I love just the way that systems are put together, how people design systems, and then how players like break those systems. It's such a really, really entertaining cycle to me. So I love talking to people like that. So I really like podcasts like this. I mean, some people can be like, oh, well, it's just kind of a Q&A. It's kind of content light. But if you really listen, you get a lot of good insight into their design philosophy, which is probably why they call it the designer insight stream, right? But just hearing about things, like cards going through different iterations, strength of card changing over time, things like that. I remember when Tyler was talking about Thrawn, right? About really trying to make it feel like you are Thrawn and make it feel for your opponent like they're playing against Thrawn, where he's always going to have this extra information, And I really like that aspect of it too, where for this game specifically, there's this real desire to help you live out certain Star Wars fantasy as well as play this card game, which I think is completely necessary for a Star Wars card game. So I'm glad that we're seeing that both in the cards themselves, but also from what the developers are saying.
I wish that, the amount of time I've played with Gwent but have no attachment to the IP, to the Witcher IP, where cards would come out that would drive people crazy. It's like, this is not what this character is supposed to do. And on the flip side, cards would come out and be like, this is exactly what this character would do, what Eskel would do, or what Geralt would do. And I feel that with Star Wars, again, because I'm so akin to the IP. Same thing with Lord of the Rings and Marvel. I love it when the cards speak for themselves. It's like, if the game text was what it was without a name on it, you'd be like, that is Han Solo. That is Luke Skywalker. You kind of feel that to a degree. So I'm happy that these types of streams occur, that we feel it as well, and that they have the right idea. The right idea being that you feel like you're playing the right character at the same time. And I want to dig into that Thrawn aspect that you talked about, but that's part of the bigger conversation that we're going to have after. I think we should get to the spoilers, and,
let's do it.
And then we'll get into the deeper conversation. First spoiler again, big thanks to SWU. By the way, SWU now has their own podcast.
I saw that.
Yeah, so we are no
this
longer...
This means war!
Exactly.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, obviously not.
Partially.
Well, that's what we're saying. This is not a competition. This is a rising tide raises all ships. So the more, the merrier, friends. And we appreciate SWU and everything they do. And we invite you to go check out their content as well.
But could we get a dark mode on the website?
Good call.
That's my one request. Could I have a dark mode?
Dark mode, please.
You're doing so much, and your website is so fantastic already, but Could I get a dark mode? These old eyes can't handle the bright lights of your
These
white
eyes
website.
are bleeding. These eyes have seen a lot of websites that have white backgrounds, and I'm going blind. All right, I'm done.
Wow. When's the album coming out?
Never. That's it. That in fact, I have a
Oh.
Patreon now where if you don't give me money, the album comes out.
Wait, do you mean if they don't give you money, the album doesn't come out?
No. If they
Like
pay
they're
me
paying
to
you to keep it
they
from
pay
coming out?
exactly. They pay
Okay,
me
yeah.
monthly to keep it suppressed. That's how it
All
goes.
right.
Yeah.
Cool. I thought they did that with a Wu-Tang Clan album or something at some point. But
Oh wow.
I don't know. There was like wasn't there some like
Oh
Wu-Tang Clan album that was bought by somebody?
yes,
Did you get to
the
come out?
Pharma Bro. Do you remember Pharma Bro?
Oh yeah, I do.
Shrekley or something?
One of the greatest internet trolls of all time.
Yeah, I believe
That guy.
he purchased an like unreleased music from Wu-Tang. I could be wrong about this. And then I think he was trying to raise funds to release it, or said if I get paid X amount of dollars, I'll release it. And then now the dude's I think in jail. I don't know.
Probably. I think so too. But
Yeah.
man, he really was an expert at irritating people.
Big time. I'll go for the first one here. It's very simple. It's
Sure.
merely the Echo base. It's a Hoth location, and it's your command 30 health location on Hoth. And I very much believe that the locations are eventually going to matter. If not this set, then for sure in future sets.
I would imagine. I mean, it makes sense. I think it also makes sense to just release bases with different themes that you can pick from sort of like a visual perspective, right? I mean, obviously, if you're playing a, commander heroism leader, if you're playing like Hera's commander heroism, right? You're not going to want to play like the Death Star, right, for your location. You're going to want to do something rebellion related. So I'm glad, we're getting different, thematic ones to image wise that give us that. But yeah, I mean, it's a location, so it'd be great to see that play into deck building more in the future.
Yeah, hit us with the next one. This next one I think I am ultra excited about.
All right, so yeah, this is a Cantina Bouncer. It's double cunning, so your deck building is restricted a bit by this, right? Because again, you need to have if you don't have two cunning aspects among your leader and your base, then you're gonna have to pay 2 for each one you're missing, right? So in a single cunning deck, this would be 7. But in a double cunning deck, this is only 5. It's a 3/5. When played, you may return a non-leader unit to its owner's hands. So it is waylay with a 3/5 body for 2 more resources. So that's a pretty good deal. I mean, I think in a lot of cunning only decks, if people are gonna go, mono cunning, so to speak, I think you definitely include this. 5 is expensive, but you do get the 3/5, and you do remove a unit from the other side, and it can be space, it can be ground, it's whatever is best to remove at the time. And this is a game where if it's resource turn 5, they spend 5 resources on a unit, you drop the Cantina Bouncer and send it right back to their hand. They have basically lost a big part of their turn. So it is a pretty huge swingy card. So yeah, definitely gonna have a lot of power, I think.
This card essentially does 2 things. Number one, it reaffirms my belief that this is the blue of Star Wars Unlimited. If you're a Magic player, this is blue through and through. Like cunning is blue. I think it's with the bounce effects, the denial effects, things like that. 100%. That's what it feels like. That is in which case, for the most part, blue has always been the companion color. It has always been the support color for major strategies. You could win with mono blue. It's usually a greasy win. It usually involves a lot of unblockables or flying units that are going to drive your opponent mad.
Losing a friend if you play it against somebody that you are acquaintances with.
Precisely. You need to have a very strong relationship to play kitchen table Magic, where you're literally just bringing blue to the table.
Yeah, if you try to drop stasis on me at like a kitchen table Magic, I'm gonna be like, get out of my house.
Basically, exactly.
Don't come back.
Yeah,
Don't talk to me
and
anymore.
leave the chips that you brought.
Yeah. Right.
But other than that, I think that double cunning is going to be very difficult to pull off because I think that this Cantina Bouncer for a double cunning, is this the first double cunning unit that we've seen?
Let me consult SWU.
Yeah, you take a look at that.
I am not sure.
Because we've seen double cunning for all the legendary events, but as a unit, what I worry about for double cunning is that double cunning means that you need to rely on something else to essentially win the game. Unless there's other major cunning threats that come out, cunning has essentially established itself as the support system and the disruption system for other winning strategies, and in which case paying 7 for this card is not going to cut it. You'd probably rather play Waylay. So you have to wonder, is villainy or heroism like enough to carry you to a victory if you're running double cunning?
This is our first double cunning unit that we've seen.
Yeah. In which case, this to me feels good for 5 and feels terrible for 7. So I am on the fence about this. The only time I can really evaluate this card is if they start printing bigger cunning threats that can support an all villainy or an all heroism kind of deck, because I am not paying 7 for this. And
I think this might be our first double aspected unit.
Any unit,
in
right?
general.
Yeah. That's what I was curious about. But otherwise, like, this effect is awesome. I think that even in a limited capacity, this is good. If you want to pay 7, it could be problematic, but bouncing your opponent's big unit that they can't afford to replay and then go and face could be good. It's kind of like a trick that sort of gets you around a really tough opponent to finish them off. But for 7, it's bad. For 5, it's great. Like, and it's such a razor thin margin.
Yeah. I think it's a good card. I think if we got to talk about limited in the spirit of Charmer, who is not with us this week. And I would say if you're playing limited, going mono cunning might not be a terrible idea, honestly, because you're going to have all of that disruption. And this is going to be a card you're going to include for sure. Yeah. So as I think about that, I think going cunning only might be an interesting limited strat.
Now, if you're talking about triple cunning or just double cunning, because like
you can't go triple cunning.
No, you can't. I guess you're right. Yeah. So if
It's
we talk about mono,
when I say monocolor, I mean, like, obviously your leader is either going to have heroism or villainy. That is a trait of every leader in this game that's been revealed. And then you're going to have one aspect besides that on your leader, right? And so it's like, if you choose that same aspect for your base, I've seen people call that monocolor, essentially, because they're not really seeing heroism and villainy as aspects that exist in the same way that the other 4 do, and I'm kind of on board with that way of thinking, right? So yeah, I mean, you can say mono cunning or double cunning and they're both right, which is kind of confusing, but it's true.
We won't have the same kind of schism as we have with the Greedo Han Solo shooting first debate.
It might be even greater, actually.
Could be greater, yeah.
Bigger schism.
Next week, the poll. If you play if you play 2 cunnings and a villainy, are you mono cunning or double cunning? We'll ask that.
Yep.
So next one is right in my wheelhouse. It is the Avenger. It's That's Imperial exciting. Star Destroyer, and I love this tagline for it: "Hunting Star Destroyer." It is not hunting Star Destroyers. It is the hunting Star Destroyer. It is out there looking for trouble. It is out there trying to ruin your day. It's a 9-drop space unit with Vigilance and Villainy, an 8/8 Imperial Vehicle Capital Starship. When played or on attack, both. An opponent chooses a non-leader unit they control, defeat that unit.
Yeah.
Kaboom.
It is a legendary, so it's going to be pretty incredible, and that is a pretty incredible ability. To be able to make them remove a unit both on deploy and on attack. It's expensive. I mean, I don't know if outside of green, like if you think of like Super Laser Technician and stuff, we haven't really seen a great way to get to the point where you can get a lot of this stuff out, reliably. But man, if you can, it's going to end games, right? So I want to try to build something with a bunch of Star Destroyers in it. It's inevitable. I think you have to go command with it from what we've seen, but like it would be very, very cool to have a way to get these ships out.
What I like about this is that this is not even this isn't a 3 of that I would put in a deck. You don't need 3 Avengers. You draw it and you can't play it twice. It's hard enough to get rid of.
You can resource it.
You can resource it. You're right. Yeah. I think that like some of the bigger ones, like Avenger, like once all the big Star Destroyers come out, and you're like, okay, these are like the real gems, and these are just behemoths that are whatever. I think that it's like Avengers might be like a 2 of the, like in my opinion, the Star Destroyer that stops your opponent from playing events, like it just cancels the first event that's ever played. That to me is like, that's the backbone, because you don't want to get one of your Star Destroyers killed by an event, right? Like that's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
But
Which one was that?
it was the first one that came out, and I it was it Relentless or something. I completely forgot.
Yeah, I think it was a green one, wasn't it?
Yes.
Relentless. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that one's also 9, so that's another expensive one.
Yeah, and that's fine. And like again, to me, the first thing I want to do is I just want to build a command vigilance villainy deck, and figure out a way that Thrawn can be my leader. I know that doesn't make sense, but like,
Yeah, because he's cunning.
yeah, it's tough.
He's got the Chimera though.
He does have the
That
Chimera. Yeah.
That one's been revealed, so we know there is with at least one Star Destroyer in cunning. That's cool, and it's only 8. It's a little bit cheaper.
It's going to be tough to sort of source out how I want to do this, but ultimately, like these big Star Destroyers to me are, it's like, okay, if you're, the beauty of this is that like the way that this card is balanced is that your opponent makes the choice of what they defeat. So in a go wide kind of weenie deck, this card is not necessarily going to get the same amount of value, because if you're defeating a 1 or 2 drop versus your opponent only has 2 fat boys on the board, yeah, you get a choice, but either one of those suck. This is a brilliant card. This just reignites my desire to go big and tall in space and big and tall on the ground, because we're still missing some AT-ATs.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd hope we get more. I mean, I would imagine we will at some point at least. But I'm just kind of looking through green right now, because we've got stuff like Admiral Piet, right, which is 2 for 1/4 command villainy. Each friendly non-leader unit that costs 6 or more gains ambush. So if you have him out on the board and you play Avenger, you get to make them choose a non-leader unit to defeat. Then you ambush to hit one of their other units, which with 8 power you're probably going to kill it. And they have to choose another one to defeat. You might get a lot of stuff going in there. Although the on attack does get decided before the battle between the units happens, I believe.
Yes.
So the person whose unit you attack could just choose that unit to defeat. So,
but that's fine.
But still, that's cool. That's still 2 units, and that means your Avenger doesn't take damage either. So that's not a bad thing for you per se, if I'm getting the rules right as I understand them.
We call it win-win, Doa.
Yeah. Or win-win-win.
Oh, win-win-win. Yeah.
Units,
it's
like,
mono win.
Avenger, yeah.
Mono win.
Mono win, yeah. No, it's triple win. Triple win.
Oh, it's a triple win. You're right. Yeah. Well, we'll put that up on the
poll next week. Yeah.
Anything left to say about this just absolute space titan?
No. I like the art on the Star Destroyers for the most part. I think it's cool. Star Destroyers just look neat, So yeah, just a cool card. Glad to see more Star Destroyers coming out. I mean, that's anyone who loves space battles and all that kind of stuff loves the Star Destroyer. There's such an iconic, intimidating, gigantic space presence. So getting to see a bunch of named ones is really neat. But yeah, I'm ready to move on if you are.
Love it. Let's go to the next one. This is yours, actually. Unless do you want me to do this one because it's kind of like meh? You can get the one after that. It's up to you.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. If we want to divide Star Destroyers here or capital ships at least, we can do it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. I'll do the next one. It's a 2-cost upgrade within command. It's the holodeck on the Starship Enterprise, or maybe not, or maybe it's a scene from Ender's Game. I don't know, but it's called Academy Training, and it is a learned upgrade. Basically. There's no text, so +2/+2. It's a 2-cost +2/+2 upgrade that goes on anything. It's a common. You need cards like this. You need kind of draft chaff. This is not a constructed piece, in my opinion, unless some sort of crazy Voltron style deck is created. But ultimately, it's just grist for the mill, as it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking through the other cards. I try to. I mean, like it's getting to the point where it's like I'm pretty sure I've got everything that's been revealed memorized, but I still go through and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot they showed that one too. But it's something where it's like, yeah, I agree. It's like, your typical giant growth type spell if you're, into MTG and remember that old one. It's just buff a unit. This one is permanent. Obviously, it's an upgrade. But the one thing to keep in mind is that if there are cool ways in the future to interact with upgrades, this could find a place in a constructed deck. If there is something where it's like you get some benefit from upgrades, right? So, or you mess with them in some way,
Well,
so that there is that too to kind of keep in mind, because that's something that I think of when I think of the old Star Wars CCG days, right, where they had a lot of upgrades on units, and their upgrades were weapons and equipment and things like that, and then there were a lot of other cards that interacted with those, and it feels very Star Warsy to have that exist in this game too. So that's my take on it anyway.
oh, what if we get a leader that's like Watto or Unkar Plot, who are like these junk dealers, and the
I
whole
love a
thing.
Watto leader.
Yeah,
That'd be
all
great.
of your upgrades cost one less, or something like that, or
Yep.
something along the lines of where you can steal an upgrade from an opponent by paying twice its deploy cost. Like, that could be an interesting little thing.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to, or maybe this could be like, Watto could be like, instead of being a leader, could be like a cunning unit where when he's on the board, he makes upgrades cost one more.
Oh yeah,
Or
that
something
makes
like
sense.
that. Because he's trying to swindle you, right? Like that's an option, I guess.
What a bastard.
Yep. I mean, the Watto, like, he's got to be villainy if he's a leader. He's not a good. He owns slaves. He's not a good person,
Yes.
or whatever. Toydarian, my bad.
He is a
he's not good
Toydarian.
Toydarian person, right?
Yeah, and I just should mention this was revealed by Late Night Gaming. So thank you very much, Late Night Gaming.
There you go. For the record, I do want to see leaders made out of some of the more minor characters too, because I think that would just be fun.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
yeah, I'm ready to move on if you are.
Make it happen.
All right, make it so.
Make it so.
Just like Obi-Wan said. Yeah.
You son of a... I believe it was Gandalf in the X-Men who said that.
Oh yeah, you're right. I got that one wrong. Yep. Played by Christopher Lee. Iconic performance.
They caught it, directed by Steven Spielberg. We could
That's
go
right,
on.
that's
We
right.
could just go on.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, moving on to our next large ship, it's the Ruthless Raider. So it's a aggression villainy, which is an interesting combo for a big ship, a big unit in general. Costs you 6. It is a 4/6 Imperial vehicle capital ship. When played / when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. So you're going to get 4 and 4 out of this theoretically throughout the life of the unit, unless it's bounced by, something in cunning. It's a bit on the expensive side for a for a 4/6, right? I feel like 4/6, but then you can argue that, well, it's got 4 power, but you're getting theoretically 4 extra damage, so it's effectively 8/6 worth of damage if you attack with it once. So I understand why it's statted that way, but in an aggression deck, in a deck that so far we've seen aggression generally want to move a little bit quicker from the cards that have been revealed, is this quick enough? I think pretty much every game is going to get to like turn 6, so you're probably going to get a chance to play it. Is this maybe like a finisher, right, where you've gone so wide that they've had to use so many resources handling that then a 4/6 is that much more difficult to deal with, right? Because 6 health is a lot in this game, so it could potentially be good, but I'm kind of on the fence about this one if I really love it or not,
I tend to agree, because if your game is sort of aggression and aggro, as it were, paying 6 for something feels like paying 6,000. It's very expensive, but the spirit of this card reminds me of Leper Gnome from Hearthstone, or more recent Shadow Priest. There was like that 4/3 Death Rattle, deal 3 to your opponent's face. Anything that has inevitability to it, or that kind of additional threat. The on play, the when played, is very important. I think that's great. It could snipe a small unit or remove a shield and then deal damage to the base as well. But at the same time, when this hits the board, you have to also adjust your math. Much like when you're playing Flesh and Blood and you're playing against a brute or you're playing against a warrior, they have defense reactions that can damage you. So when you think you're safe at 2 or 1 and you're swinging in for lethal, and they come in with a Reckless Swing or a Steel Blade Shunt and kill you, that is part of what this card represents, except it's just on the board. It's like when this is on the board, you know that you are already 2 health less than what is represented. It's like when this dies, I'm taking 2 damage to the face. I have to calculate that in, so it creates a little bit of uncertainty. It also changes the dynamic of how you approach things, and it shortens the game span. But like you said, at 6 for a 4/6, if this was a 6-drop, let's say, 6/4, much better. If this was a 6-drop 5/5, maybe a little bit better. But the 4/6 aspect of it, it's already hard to kill.
Sure.
So
yeah.
the demise effect, the death rattle or whatever you want to call it, is going to be tough.
When defeated?
The when defeated, the WD of it is tough.
Yeah, I am undervaluing this a little bit on second glance. It's because 6 health is sticky, and you are essentially like 4 health down actually when you play this, presuming you're not again playing cunning and you can bounce it somehow, or you can restore. There's ways to get around the health loss, but 30 health base, you're down like what is it, 7.5%. So it's there's something there, right? So yeah, maybe this isn't that bad. I do wonder where it'll fit in the constructed meta. Again, this is something where it's like, if I'm playing aggression, this is my finisher in limited, right? Like I get to play this thing, and at that point in the game, in a limited game, it's probably going to be difficult to deal with. So, I think it's got its use there at least. But I need to see a little bit more as far as like how aggression is going to come together as a deck, especially on the villainy side, to really see if I really love it or not.
I was also thinking about this card from just like this with cunning, because it's like, okay, you play it, you deal 2 and 2. You bounce it, you replay it. The problem is, again, for 6, it's just it's not feasible to actually develop a strategy of this. But if this was like a 2-drop that had like a 1/1 stat line that's like deal 1 and 1, that'd be
really good.
Yeah, that could be crazy. That's something
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. Like, do you remember Pen Flinger meta in Hearthstone?
I stopped playing by that point already.
Okay, so for those who don't know, Pen Flinger, I think, was one. It's like when you attack or when you play it, it deal 1 damage to something, and then the whole strategy was just constantly bouncing it, playing it to like an infinite sort of combo to a degree. And that's, I think, what Star Wars is looking to avoid, is those kinds of things. That's why this is a 6-drop, because even if this was like a 3/5 for 4, I'd be like, yeah, this could be a cunning bounceable target of just play it, do some damage, bounce it, replay it as a 10 mana turn, and have a good time. Like, you could basically
10 resources.
Well, 10, if you get there as this. But like, think about it this way, Doa. If this was a 4-drop, you play it on 4, your opponent responds. You can't swing with it. Oh, that's right, you can't swing with it. But like, your opponent might start putting work into it. You bounce it, you play it again, you do some more damage, and now it's back as a 4/6 again.
I think you really, really want to make this card work. I feel like you've fallen in love.
I've
with the Ruthless Raider.
I've fallen in love with the concept, not the card itself.
I think there's a very good reason why we haven't seen a lower cost card that does something similar, because
cunning exists.
That would be obscenely strong. Yeah, for many reasons. But yeah.
Again, thank you to Late Night Gaming also revealing this card. One
more.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, all right.
Who was the pilot of Red Squadron 3 at the Battle of Yavin?
It was Wedge, right?
It was not Wedge.
Oh, was it Biggs?
It was Biggs. In fact, yes, it was.
Biggs died. What does it say unstoppable?
Well, that's exactly the point I wanted to make here.
Yeah. That's why I thought it was Wedge. I was like, am I wrong? Like, I thought that, because my initial thought was that it was Biggs, and then I was like, but he died.
He did die. This is Red 3, a 3-drop aggression heroism space unit. Red 3 quoted as being unstoppable.
Red 3.
Ask Black Squadron about that moniker, because I'm pretty sure they have something to say about it.
I was going to say, if we go by only the movies, like, I'm not as familiar with Biggs in the extended canon, but if we go by only the movies, he was like one of the most stoppable members of Red Squadron. Sorry, Biggs. It's true.
Pretty
Hard
much.
stop.
Yeah, no, that was yeah, exactly. Full stop, frankly. A totally
Yeah.
stoppable Red 3 is a Rebel vehicle fighter. It's a 2-3. It has Raid 1, so it gets +1/+0 when attacking. Each other friendly heroism unit gains Raid 1 as well. So it's just basically helping everybody out around it, giving it additional attack value within the heroism group to move forward and punch through and deal a little bit of extra damage. It's a rare. I like X-Wings. I love X-Wings. I just don't. I don't know. I mean, if you're heroism aggression, you're probably going to be putting a lot of units on the board. Hopefully, they're going to be heroism. This kind of feeds that. Like as a 3-drop, I think this is fine. But again, raid to me just speaks of aggression, and aggression speaks of low to the ground, swarmy style strategies of just pushing face and letting your opponent make the trades and the decisions.
Yeah, I was just looking through Biggs lore just a moment ago, and there's a picture of Biggs Darklighter in a swimsuit on the Star Wars fandom wiki from apparently there was a comic where he went on vacation, which I'm glad he got a vacation in before Darth Vader killed him. But you know, but there is we got swimsuit Biggs Darklighter in case anyone is out there.
You're gonna have to send me that picture because
I did. I just sent it to you on Discord.
Oh,
it's in there.
Let me have a quick look at this.
Check it out. It looks about as you'd expect.
No shame.
Looks like my dad.
I was gonna say this is the dude who just
actually looks like my dad.
He turned 41. All right, he took his family to like Cancun for a week, and he's at the pool, and he's just saying, "Hey,
it all hang out."
He's like, "Kids, you ready to go? Dinner's being served. All right, let's vamonos." That's the kind of guy he is.
Or let's skedaddle.
Yeah.
You'd say like this is the kind of swimsuit that would embarrass your children if Biggs is a dad. I'm just look it up. It's the Biggs Darklighter, StarWarsFandom.com, hey, sponsor us or whatever. There's a Vacation Biggs, which I feel like needs to be a card now.
This is going on. First of all, it's going to be on the YouTube channel, but we're going to wait a bit.
On the thumbnail. Yeah.
Yeah. So we encourage you to come check us out, but I will tweet this out from the Wampa Radio account because this is information that everybody needs to have.
I had no idea the lore was so deep. Anyway, back to the card. Red 3, dubiously unstoppable. Each other friendly heroism unit gets raid 1. That's like crazy good, right? I mean, because in a low cost, low to the ground, aggressive rebel deck, heroism deck, each friendly heroism unit. So it doesn't say each space unit or each ground unit. It says every unit. So that means everything on the ground would get this too. So you can kind of play this however you want, and then everything you've got attacking gets that +1, right? So this is going to be a card that when it hits the board, it is, depending on the board state, but usually it's going to be something that your opponent is going to need to respond to. Even with only like a couple things out, it gets really strong, right? If you have a turn 1 play, and this comes out on turn 2, suddenly that turn 1 play is hitting above average, right? So I think it's just a really great card. It's a rare, so you expect it to be pretty good. It's a fairly iconic ship in Star Wars, despite it, not being around for too long. It was Luke's friend, that's why you remember, right? But like, it's a really good card. Yeah, good for space, good for ground. Just solid 2/3 stat line for 3. Yeah, I mean, I'll take it.
Very rare deleted scene from A New Hope is when Luke is at Tosche Station talking to Biggs Darklighter. That is
Seen that.
Yeah, it's a very good one. Biggs Darklighter, of course, left the Imperial Academy to join the rebellion, and unfortunately did not make it back to the...
Kind of trying to talk Luke into it. Yeah.
The
swimsuit did not help, though. Yeah.
Let's move on to the last one, my friend.
All right, I got it. It's Scout Bike Pursuer. Vigilance Villainy, costs 2. It's an Imperial Trooper, 1/4 stat line with grit. So this is interesting. It's interesting because so first of all, I think it's a really solid card. I think having a 1/4 grit for 2, that's a turn 1 play, because you get 2 resources on your first turn, so you can throw that down. It's not going to maybe kill a lot of stuff itself, but anything running into it, it running into something is going to buff its attack a little bit with grit as long as it doesn't die. This looks like a prime target for upgrades, I would say too. But I'm puzzled a bit by the sort of theme of this card, right? Because it's a scout bike pursuer. We see him on a speeder bike. It's one of the forest troopers is what they used to call them back in the day, the ones on Endor, right? But it's not a vehicle. It's just a trooper. So the speeder bike is kind of taken out of the equation. And then grit seems like a strange sort of attribute to give a speeder bike, which is basically 0 armor, moves very quickly. So this feels like it should be a red card with a different ability, a different stat line. I feel like this should be a completely different card. That's my only criticism. As a card as it exists, I think it's a good card. I think the stat line is good, the ability is good. It fits well thematically into Villagen's villainy, but the thing that it is, a scout on a speeder bike does not fit the card, I think. So and I hate to be negative, but yeah, I just don't feel like the what this thing is fits the card at all.
Yeah, it kind of.
I think it's a good card.
It feels a little bit like it's kind of strayed away from the right thing. Kind of like, you see those nature documentaries where it's like, this pheasant was raised by a pack of wolves. It's like, okay.
Oh, he was raised to be really tough. He was not going to fly into trees, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's it.
I feel like this should have been like a desert trooper on a dewback or something, right?
Yeah.
Slow moving. You don't have to put vehicle necessarily because it's an animal. It can take some hits and get angry, hence the grit. I feel like this should be a sand trooper on a dewback, not a scout bike trooper. So I think they just got the wrong character. I think they got the wrong character with the card here.
Well, it's already in print, so they'll have to live with it. Yeah, but I think you're right. From a lore perspective, this kind of feels a little bit like a whiff, but the card itself, I think, is excellent. I think the card is, I think it's constructed playable, and I think it's a limited, high-value common in limited. This is one where if you get past this, like mid-pack, and you're within this color range, you are exceptionally happy to draw this. Scout Bike Pursuer, again, all that stuff aside, it is what it is. But the fact that it's got a 4 body on it, it could trade with a lot of early game weenies and just get stronger. And the best thing is that once it gets to a point where it's got 1 health left, well, it's swinging in for a 4/1, so you can kind of just tank it into something and maybe get a value trade out of it. I think that this is a card that, like you put very astutely, is that you slam upgrades on this and you are feeling good. When I was talking about Voltron decks, a Voltron deck is essentially you're putting all your eggs in one basket, protecting it, and letting it do most of the work. This is, if you're going to build Voltron-style things of like, this is a very good skeleton framework to start slapping upgrades on because it only gets better and it only gets better. And it comes out early on with survivability, tradability. It's a very, very great card. Plus, a lot of the good upgrades come within Vigilance. So I think that this might be, like that foundational level of building to something bigger with upgrades.
Yeah, I mean, you just put something like, Vigilance has things like Repair, which is, restore 3 health to something like that, which obviously takes grit away, but it keeps it alive. But you can put Resilient on it, make it into a 1/7. Suddenly the grit gets a lot scarier with that. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with it. I do agree. I think it's a really good common. It might be one of the better commons we've seen get revealed so far, actually. I just don't, like I said, I just don't feel like the character fits the card. Maybe the idea was like, well, it's pursuing you, so it's not giving up. It's got grit, right? It's going to stick with the chase. But that also doesn't really seem very indicative of the way that chase played out in Jedi, which is, where this character is from art-wise, from what we can see. So, but as a common in the game, Star Wars Unlimited, I think it's a very good card. I will draft it in a heartbeat, and might make it into some constructed decks too, for sure.
I want to say muchas gracias a nosotros amigos at El Valle del Jedi for revealing this one. So thank you very much. All right. That does it for our reveals up until today, being the 7th of December at around 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anything after this, we are not responsible for. I'm going to say that every single time.
It's true.
Okay, so this topic actually, so we wanted to actually do this episode to be more so about exploring ideologies and how aspects can connect together to play certain styles or deck types and archetypes and ideologies. But Charmer is out being corporate Charmer at some sort of convention, and we have been inspired. And I want to read this submission to the mailbag, to the Wampa Radio mailbag at wamparadiopodcast@gmail.com. This came in from our good friend Larry H. Let me throw this out there here for you, Doa. Hey,
Sure.
guys, and to 2/3 of you, great job casting the Realm event. So for those who don't know, there was a big 20K tournament for Flesh and Blood. Charmer and I were casting that. Doa, unfortunately, was not there.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. It actually says, Doa. It says in this message, Doa, you are still loved.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Hey, cheers to you.
It says, I was playing at an armory recently. An armory is like an FNM, like a Friday Night Magic. It's just basically your LGS putting on a weekly event. And had a discussion with somebody about Star Wars Unlimited. He's played the demo deck at conventions, been keeping up with spoilers, and though excited for the game, he started talking about stacks and how it could compare to Flesh and Blood. I had to mention that so far for this game, it seemed to probably not have a stack or instance, and that kind of turned him off a little. He said that pretty much removes the interaction with another player, and the one example I remember he used is playing a big unit and it getting removed the same turn without any responses from him. For example, the example he uses if you play a unit and you can respond by immediately waylaying it. Even without seeing the full card pool, I honestly don't mind the fact that as I feel the aspects themselves provide enough interaction, but I can see the potential feels bad moments he was referring to. How do you guys feel about there being no instant speed or reaction type cards in SWU yet or potentially ever? So the scenario he presented is he plays his big bomb, and you very cheaply waylay it back without your opponent having the opportunity to protect it with, let's say, a counterspell. And this email sparked our interest in what this episode is going to be about, which is the strategic layers that still exist despite the fact that Star Wars U has no stack. It has no instant speed. And for those who aren't aware, a stack is basically... it's like I play a card, before it resolves, my opponent will have a response to it, which then I may have a response to, and you're stacking these resolution effects on top of each other. That is called the stack, and these all occur between the resolution of particular actions. So I ask you this, Doa, because I think you and I actually have the same thought process of this. Do you feel that Star Wars U is lacking a significant strategic element to it by not having a stack or an instant speed interaction timeline here?
I don't think so. No. And the reason is sure, there's going to be moments where it's like, yeah, you play something, it gets waylaid or it gets vanquished or whatever. And there's going to be moments where, like, you in Magic the Gathering, you play something, it gets counterspelled, right? And if you're in Magic and like, oh, I can't do anything about this, it's been counterspelled. Well, why can't you do anything about it? Well, the answer is because you may not have a card or the resources and play the mana and play to prevent that from happening. Whereas in Star Wars Unlimited, it's honestly the same thing, right? Where it's like, oh, my thing got waylaid. Well, why didn't you structure your turn in a way where that was less likely to happen? And I think that's where, people have yet to sort of like grasp the depth of this game, where if I don't want something of mine to be waylaid, I'm going to go into a turn where I'm like, I want to play this thing, I want it to stick, hence I'm going to do everything else I can before I play this, right? Where it's like, I'm going to attack with my units, I'm going to, maybe even pass, right? And because I know they have more actions. And once I see they've spent enough resources, then I can play my thing and then it's safe. Or I'm doing this stuff, they're not using their resources, they're waiting for me to do this. That tells me that they have this removal. So now I'm going to play something different to bait that out or to try to throw off their game plan. So I don't think not having a stack reduces the strategic depth, because you have so much more depth in terms of how you approach the ordering and things you do in your turn, right? When you have instant speed mechanics, then you can respond in instant speed, right? But when you have a game like this, it's much more methodical, and I like that, where it's like, I know my opponent is going to get to do something after I do something, so I need to really pay attention to the order in which I do things. And the extent to which that is important in this game is, to a degree, that's, I feel like, unique in other card games I've played, and really, really fun, right? Where it's like, a lot of times, yeah, if my big thing got waylaid, like, kind of my own fault, right? Like, I should really know that's coming, because using waylay as an example, it's a 3-cost card, right? If I play something on resource turn 3 and they waylay it right away, then basically, like, neither of us do much on our turn. And so it's kind of a wash, right? So then I've got my card back in my hand. They're down that waylay. So who really comes out ahead in that trade? You know, it's kind of me, because I can play my thing again and I know they have one less waylay, right? And the turn, you know, it's kind of remains static, depending again on what the board state is going into that. But turn 3, there's not going to be a huge, you know, disparity, most likely on either side, right? Go to the later game where I have like 8 resources, right? And then I'm worried about waylay. Then things come into play that I was talking about earlier, where it's like, I'm going to use what I've established and the other cards in my hand even to try to bait out that waylay, you know, or maybe even just not play the thing, right? If I really need it to stick, I'm going to wait until an opportunity for it to stick. And if you're in a situation where you must play that card and just cross your fingers, well, then it doesn't matter, you know, if there's instant speed or not, right? Because the game state is as such where you're just in that situation and you're going to play it no matter what either way. And so there's no difference there between getting a counterspelled magic and waylaid here. So I think a concern about not having an instant stacking aspect to the game doesn't really take into account the amount of depth there is in the action system that exists in the game. So I'm not worried about it at all. That's a long-winded answer, but that's my TED Talk on why I'm not concerned about it at all.
Oh, I think that I mean, you made a lot of good points, and the problem here that I see to a degree is that, like you mentioned, the strategy that you're abandoning or that you're leaving on the table from not having a stack or not having interactability with us instant speed sort of at instant speed, what you're doing in that case is that you're essentially finding all the strategy and enhancing it by having this shared turn, one action, to a degree of bluffing as well. And the point that you made, I think, was very smart, where you're like, if you know that your opponent has it, you can work around them and you can almost like price them into having a suboptimal turn by knowing that information. And I've encountered this a lot when I play Magic, where if I'm playing with blue and they know I'm holding 2 or 3 mana open where blue is prominent, they want to absolutely make sure that I get the minimal amount of value off my counterspell, especially if it's in, let's say, limited, where there's not many of those that exist. And I have been baited into these situations where they have like 6, 7, 8 lands open, and I'm like, you're going to drop your bomb and I'm just going to get all the tempo back because I'm going to ice you out of that big play. But then they're like, well, I'm going to play a 1-drop, then I'm going to play a 3-cost spell, and then I'm going to pass. And then that 3 resources that you held open, that's on you. Now you wasted 3 resources and I developed my board, and now it goes back to you. And it's like, all right, well, now what are you going to do? Well, I always have to hold 3 resources open to hold this. And I'm not saying that, it's like there's an easy way to circumvent that kind of counterspell environment. But at the same time, if counterspells existed in this game, then it becomes an arms race. Because if you play an 8-drop and your opponent counterspells it, you need to have a counterspell for their counterspell. And then it becomes, well, who has more and who has them well timed.
Yeah.
The way that the strategy is layered in this game is such that, like you said, if you know what your opponent's holding, or you have suspicions or whatever, and you have to act on them. There's going to be instinct in this game, and there's going to be experience, and then this is where the skill level truly comes in. And the point you made that I really freaking loved was, what if I have initiative and I just pass? What if that's the play? Now I'm in the responsive position, and now it's on you. And now it's like, well, do I leave this open? Maybe I need this resources maybe I need these resources to like, to waylay your big thing. But if you didn't play anything, now it's on me to establish a board, and now you can react to it. So
Right.
there's going to be that part of it. The back and forth of each turns in a phase are going to be so important. And I think that as a strategic element, you, me, Charmer, everybody who I've spoken to has tried and played the game, who has card game experience, it's the same conclusion they come to, which is this is deceptively deep and this is deceptively layered.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's really all that deceptively, right? I mean, it's just if you've played any sort of game where you alternate actions, because there are other ones out there. It reminds me of like the Dynasty phase and the Legend of the Five Rings LCG that Fantasy Flight also made, coincidentally. It's there is a lot of depth into it. Like you can't just be playing stuff, or you're gonna get caught, right? You got to think through your turn and be like, all right, well, if I've got this board state, the thing I'm probably gonna want to do first is use my units, right? Unless I think there's something that they're gonna play that I need my unit to respond to. I want to wait as long as possible to use my resources so that I can use those kind of without the worry of something being messed up, right? With impunity, as if you will, So it does get really interesting, and I've printed out the demo decks and I've played quite a bit, and you do sort of get that feeling where it's like, wow, I really want to play this card, but like actually they haven't. I look at their side of the board, they've got 5 resources, they haven't played anything. Like I'm just gonna pass. Like if they pass, then the turn is over, and then no threat to anyone. Fine, we just move on with 1 more resource. If they don't pass, then they have to do something. And if they spend those resources, then I'm safe. So it's like learning how to pass, I think, is going to be a very big core component of being good at this game.
And that's going to sort of also fall into experience, knowing what your opponent may have, knowing what they are likely representing with how they're approaching the game and how they're holding resources or holding cards. Because if your opponent is like plays a cunning card, that they're going to be playing more so from a responsive standpoint. But if you have a unit on the board, and rather if your first action is to attack, then now the onus is on them to either develop the board, react with a card, or do whatever, wherein that's going to cost them certain resources, and then you have a freer game space to develop your cards. And then it's like, I played my big thing, passes back to me. My last action is going to be, I'm going to yoink the initiative, so that my big thing that I now, insulated away from all your open resources, now it actually has an opportunity to swing first. So there's going to be a lot of strategy involved in turn sequencing and intuition. And I think that is such a difficult skill to master, because anybody can play their 1-drop on curve, 2-drop, 3-drop, go face. Anybody can identify what a value trade is going to be, but it's not easy to cultivate that sort of extra sixth sense that you develop in card games to know that my player or my opponent is likely representing this or this, and based on certain play patterns, I have to decide, are they holding a big unit or are they holding a disruptive effect? And I need to make a call here. So that kind of intuition, that kind of recognizing what the game state is and what it means for you, that's a skill that is going to be developed. And I think that's where the complexity of the card game kind of doesn't need something like instant speed effects and doesn't need something like the stacks to revolve. So for Larry's friend here, who may have been a little bit turned off of the game because it doesn't have this aspect to it, that's perfectly fair. And I understand that, because as soon as you remove elements from the structure of a game and the rule set of a game, you automatically think that you're losing complexity or layers to it. But I don't believe that's the case. I think that this game is actually strong enough on its own to make that work. And I'm kind of glad that we're playing a game at sorcery speed. I'm kind of glad that this is a game where I don't have to worry about what kind of surprises they may have up my sleeve on my turn. I just want to run my turn and anticipate and plan ahead to what their sequence is going to be, because that's what it's going to be. You said it in the chat. I think it was you or Charmer. You equated this to another game.
Yeah, I mean, I what is like the most strategic game of all time and also operates on a action system, it's chess. You know, and so you don't need instant speed things in chess, you know, and the great part is that the strategy comes from not like what am I gonna do, but how am I going to influence the direction of my opponent's play, right? Where it's like I have theories about this game, and one of those theories is that if I do not use my first action to attack with the unit on board, I am incentivizing my opponent to use events and reduce the strength of their board state. Where if I do attack with my unit, then I am incentivizing them to play units of their own because mine has already attacked. And so I am incentivizing a growing board state on their side. So I think it's things like that. It's and developing those theories over time. That's just a very rough one that I've kind of thought about. Is going to be a key to being good at this game. So again, it's not about what you're doing necessarily. It's about how are you going to use your actions to influence your opponent's line of play. And that's such a great way to play a strategic game that has an endless amount of depth because every opponent's going to be different. It's going to be great, you know? So I'm very excited about the strategic depth in this game. I think it's quite good. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, I don't think lacking an instant speed mechanic is going to harm this game strategically. Not at all.
Can you imagine if cunning can operate at instant speed? Like people would
That'd be awful.
You'd have a million fans of the game playing on day one, and about 200,000 of them playing on day two, where they're like, forget it, not interested in having my stuff bounced. But Legends of Runeterra, I think there's two cards in all of Legends of Runeterra that are like counterspell style effects. They have a stack in Legends of Runeterra, which is very important and integral. But in terms of counterspell related effects, there's stun, which is an ability, but in fact, the fact of just completely negating a spell, there's only one in Ionia. And anyway, so yeah, I think that you and I are on the same board that it's not necessary, and it's not really robbing the game of high level strategic elements.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that at all. I can definitely see where, people would get concerned about it, because they're like, oh, well, I like to be clever with my instant speed things in these card games. And that's fine. That is a fun element of those card games. But, one size doesn't fit all. You can't say that a game won't be good because it lacks this certain type of mechanic, So yeah, I'd say anyone who's concerned about that, give it a try, really think through your turns, and I think you'll find a lot of fun depth in it.
Beautiful. Well, you know what I say when this is usually for Charmer, so I'm doing it to you now.
I'm ready.
You know, Doa, when you're playing Magic against your opponent, and you're like, they've been just goofing on you the entire game, and they've got 3 blue open, and you're like, they're down to 3 life, and you're like, you draw that fireball, that lightning bolt off the top, and you're like, I'm gonna end the game now. I just top decked a win, and you play it, and it doesn't immediately resolve. What do you say?
I've got a bad feeling about this.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about it.
Quiet.
All right, it is the bad feeling mailbag. That one is for you, Charmer. That one was for you. He would have come up with some sort of stupid story or quip about how, he has another lightning bolt in Arsenal, even though that doesn't make sense because it's 2 different games now.
I just move it right along.
Yeah.
I'm pretty quick that way.
How do you want to approach this? We've got 2 in the mailbag that are relevant to this topic. So you want to
yeah.
Go for it.
Sure. So we'll just take the one off the top from X. You can call me Al. Alessandro Sutton. The initiative system has seemingly infinite complexity, which I love. Knowing when to prioritize damage over base over gaining initiative is a common example that comes up. Yep, that's very true. Do you think, as I do, that playing with and around initiative will be the most skill testing part of Star Wars Unlimited? I don't know if I would say it's going to be the most skill testing, but it is certainly going to be one of the most skill testing. Because there's going to be times where it's like, I could do damage to the base. Damaging the base to a certain amount is what wins you the game. However, I need the initiative for X or Y reason, whether it's to protect a unit, whether it's to not die yourself. Like there's a lot of times where like, a game will just be locked up where you're like, well, I just did this thing and I have like 5 other things I could do, but if I just take initiative now, then I just win. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be the most skill testing, but I think it's going to be a big skill testing part of the game.
I agree with you there. I think that there's still a lot of other components that you'd probably have to master before it. But the way that I describe sort of the tiers of players to get to those elite world-class players, when you're evaluating skill sets that you need to master, deck building, deck understanding, or whatever. But like I say, like sideboard is a massive part of that in terms of learning when to pass, when to block, when to this, when to that. These are all elements. And in my estimation, the players who are going to be winning tournaments are the ones who are going to know when is the right time to take initiative, to play around it, to maybe make a suboptimal turn on turn A, so that turn B with initiative, they are going above and beyond rate to win them the game. I think that is going to be a very crucial detail, that initiative is going to be one of the most underrated elements, I think, for the casual player. They're just not going to possibly not care about it as much and not value it as much. Much like in Flesh and Blood, Doa, when you're like playing with an arsenal versus playing without an arsenal, it's a completely different ball game. It's a massively different ball game, and I think that is what initiative is going to feel like. Where how important is it to send the card or take the initiative? How important is it to play the card or put it in your arsenal? It's the same kind of conversation to me. And though it may not be the number one element, like you say, I think it's going to be the differentiating factor between a player that makes a top 8 and a player that like bubbles out of a top 8 and a player that wins the entire thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the first things you should learn if you want to be competitive at this game is the initiative sort of a flow, when to grab it, when to let it go. Yeah, definitely important.
Next up is a submission from Andy Salkeld, who always sends us really great questions, and this one is no different. Andy asks us, having never played in such a style of game, are counter spells more akin to discard, where you preemptively neuter a card rather than in response? Feels like we'd be better with ostracize / duress effects over pure mind rot or Thoughtseize effects. So duress, mind rot, Thoughtseize, these are types of cards that go into your hand, pull a card out, and say you're not even going to be able to cast it. It's a preemptive counterspell to a degree in that regard. So I think that they're kind of akin to the same thing, whereas the difference is that if I'm playing duress, I'm not locking up your turn to pay the resources to play a card that I then counterspell. So I think it's completely different. In my opinion, a counterspell is much more backbreaking than a Thoughtseize or a duress, because if you were holding a counterspell and you're waiting on your opponent to essentially commit all those resources to making a play that you just eventually deny. The surprise factor of it is much more backbreaking because your opponent has committed so much and has basically passed their turn. Therefore, I think that in the same regard, there are cards that like look at your opponent's hand, discard a card. That's as close as you're going to get to a counterspell, right? I think that's right. Pretty much as close as you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like things like takedown, vanquish, waylay, like things that remove stuff instantly off the board are a little bit closer to counterspell because you just take it out before they have a chance to do it. They get to play it, so that's more like a counterspell thing where they play it and you stop it. Duress is more like what Spark of Rebellion, I think, was the one that was the one that I was so concerned about.
Yeah, the one that you're like banned.
Yeah, I
so
we'll
banned.
See, we'll see. I feel like I've become a wiser player since then, but I still think it's a very strong card. But anyway, yeah, I kind of struggle to understand a question. Oh, like which would be better off with in a game? I don't know. I think it's with this type of game. Obviously, you're not going to have. Well, I mean, we kind of did. I don't know. I don't know if one is necessarily better than the other. I don't really have a huge opinion on that, I guess. Sorry, that's a boring answer, but I don't really have much of a. I'm pretty neutral on it. I
Look,
think it's fine to have both.
From a tempo perspective, and I know Charmer loves that word.
Yeah.
From a tempo perspective, paying 2 or 3 resources to completely wipe out the 8 or 9 that your opponent committed to making a play, it is just massively better than paying 2 to weed out the card from their hand, and then they have on their turn it's just one less decision that they can make.
Do you think he means like what type of card is better to play as a player, or what type of
maybe
card
I'm
is better
reading the
for the
question
game?
incorrectly, having never played such a stuff.
I understood it as like better for the game to be in the game.
Oh, okay.
But I could be wrong. Maybe it's your way too. I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm not understanding the way that the question is framed. That's on us, Andy. And I'd love for.
I'm not smart enough to read questions this well.
The idea of preemptively neutering a card rather than in response, like that's what I kind of am digging into here, where in the in response element of like counterspelling something, they've committed the resources to that card. So if you preemptively go in there with like a duress effect or a Thoughtseize effect to just neuter it out of the card, that leaves your opponent with the resources open and now the game and all the information, right? Because if they think they got a free pass where they're like, dude, I'm dropping my 6-drop I'm going to drop my 6th land and drop my big 6-drop, and we're going to go from there. If you holding two resources open to counterspell it, you've basically time walked them. You've basically said, you don't have a turn now. That is a much better play from you than going into their hand and discarding it, because you go into their hand, you discard it. Now they're like, okay, now I'm not going to play the 6-drop. I'm going to play the 3-drop and the 2-drop. And then we're good. So, which then again leads to our major conversation earlier, Doa, which was counterspelling stuff. Like you can play around that, and like I've had these experiences in Magic where they know I have a counterspell and they're trying to devalue it by playing suboptimally and then freezing me out of it. So, very intriguing this game is.
Yeah, I don't really have, like I said, strong opinions on this particular issue, I guess.
Well,
so I'll leave it at that.
Well, that's not true, because you said earlier that should somebody show up to your house playing all blue counter spells and bounces, they are shown the door immediately.
Oh, but that's not that's in Magic the Gathering. I said I don't have opinions on it in this game.
Oh, okay, but then that might change.
Differently.
I'm going to go to Casa Doa. Okay, I'm going to play a triple cunning deck, or a mono cunning, however we want to describe it, and you will never have anything on the board ever. That is my mission.
Neither will you.
That's fine.
Because you're spending everything taking my stuff.
Fine. You know why? Because you know what my win condition is?
What?
Spite. Spite is my win condition.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
It is the wind in my sails.
When you play when you have your flip turn with your weenie cunning leader, and I come in with like Vader or something with my flip turn, good luck, because you can't remove that, can you? Can't waylay that one.
How dare you call Thrawn a weenie leader?
Hey, his strength isn't in his muscles, that's for sure.
That's in his big fat brain muscle. That's where it's at.
There you go.
All right. Well, that does it for the mailbag this week. Thank you so much to Alessandro and Andy for your submissions. Again, if you'd like to submit to the Bad Feeling mailbag, you can email us Wampa Radio at wamparadiopodcast@gmail.com. Sometimes it just becomes the entire topic of the show, like Larry H. proved to us.
It was fun.
It was fun.
It was a fun chat. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I am, which is I should be by now. I am learning a lot more about the depths of strategy that the game has, and I'm more and more excited about deck brewing and playing. I've held off on a lot of the deck building and playing with the cards have been released so far, because I don't want to skew my opinion of the first set, because I feel like playing with incomplete information is going to kind of give you false assumptions about things, and I want to just wait till everything comes out. Then I can start brewing. Then I can start, getting ready for all that stuff. So I haven't done a lot of that per se, but I've focused a lot on the core mechanics of the game, and it's been really interesting. I'm very excited. I'm more excited than ever about this game coming out.
We're getting closer to the release date of early March, and they have done an exceptional job of how they've sort of just trickled out the information. It's been a very steady stream of not just none intended, but not not just card drops, but also information about the surrounding elements. I think that unless it just completely dries up post-January. But then we're into the kind of, all right, it's the SWU waiting room kind of feeling, which is we have all the cards revealed. We just got to go. Our pre-orders are in. We're going to go make it happen. And this is my other plea to you. If this is a game that you enjoy, now's the time to go to your LGS. If they're not intending on carrying it, it's up to you. You go poke the bear and say, this is something that I and others want to play, because that's a decision that it's not easy. And being friends with some LGS owners, multiple LGS owners, a lot of the times, as cool as a game is, if it's showing no interest, they can't take a loss on it just because it's Star Wars or whatever. Sure. So you have to, you gotta beat the drum and say that, hey, we're interested. So I'm excited, man. I'm so excited.
I think that'll be a problem. Yeah,
I don't think so either. I don't think so either. All right, man. Well, great episode. Charmer wasn't here. Those are not correlated in any way, but it was a great episode nonetheless. Are you prepared to take on the secondary mantle here?
I mean, sure. I'll just say it in the regular way, though. I don't have a voice changing thing or anything.
All right. But are you ready?
Sure.
All right, man. Go for it.
May the force be with you.
Beautiful. See you next time on Wampa Radio.